Hey, family, we want to welcome you today. I am your host, Bishop Kevin Whitaker, Senior Pastor of the Epic Church. Amen. And we are excited about today's interview. I am excited because BWE and BME is a platform that is forward moving for blacks, for black people, for the African American. And we have a lot of things that have taken place over these last few days, and so it's important for us to have some conversations with capable and qualified people, right? And so before we move forward, I want to give a shout out to our founder and our CEO, Dr. Jacqueline King. We thank God for her. We thank God for all of our colleagues and all of those who are on this platform that has been going on for some years now. But I want to welcome to BWE, none other than Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher. Let me just give you his bio real quick. Reverend Earle J. Fisher, PhD, holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Lamont College, a Master of Divinity degree from Memphis Theological Seminary, and a PhD in communication from the University of Memphis. Pastor Earle is the senior pastor of what we call the Blackest Church in Memphis, Tennessee, pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, the Blackest Church. Absolutely. I believe that. I stamped that in Memphis and Shelby County. He is also the founder of Up the Vote 901, a nonpartisan voter empowerment initiative committed to producing political power and increasing voter turnout in Memphis and Shelby County. Dr. Fisher is happily married to Denise Lloyd Fisher. They have one son, Jalen Fisher, and one granddaughter, Carter and Lil Mama Fisher. I would also like to add that Dr. Fisher is the author of the Albert Cleese Jr. and the Prophetic Tradition, a reintroduction to the Black Messiah. I think that can be found anywhere, right? But
Yeah.
we're going to try to put that link in there. And so I want to say that Dr. Fisher is not a newbie to activism, to creating movements. I met him on the grounds
Yeah.
of the MLK Museum during the time where Trayvon Martin had been murdered. And he has been consistent from that day until now with what it is that God has mandated on his life. Dr. Fisher, welcome to the platform. How you doing, sir?
Well, Bishop Whitaker, all things considered, I think I'm doing okay, reasonably well. It is so good to be back with you. Thank you for this opportunity. Salute to Dr. Jacqueline King. I don't know her personally, and I don't believe I have met her, but I definitely honor, applaud, and appreciate what she has created with BWE and with BME. And I'm glad to be here in conversation with you, my brother. What's up?
Man, look, I want to give you all the time necessary so that we can have this conversation. So if it's all right with you, we're gonna jump right into some questions and allow you to respond because I believe that our people need enlightening, right, as it relates to what is taking place. There's a lot of negativity and a lot of things that's being said, and I think that we need to shed some light on it so that we can be trending in the right direction. And so, with this sudden shift, why would you say it is important for us to mobilize? And also, how important is it for us to understand what it means to be on the right side of history as it relates to what we're dealing with right now?
So I believe you're saying in the framework of the political landscape when you say what we're dealing
Absolutely.
with right now. And so this would especially be related to the recent developments of the current president suspending his reelection campaign and also
Absolutely.
endorsing the first African American, Asian American vice president, who now has, as I understand it, secured enough delegates to basically be the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. And that's definitely a shift, and not just in the political landscape over the last 72 hours, but to your point about being on the right side of history. I think part of what we suffer from, Bishop, is that so many of us either don't know history or ignore history and don't understand the critical and crucial moment that we're in right now. And when I say the critical and crucial moment, I'm not talking about some, political game that people may be playing. And I'm not even really talking about the overarching American Democratic Project per se. I'm talking about
Yes.
the history of Black life on the
Mm,
planet. As we start talking about what it means to be able to, in church terms, we would say, have life and that more abundantly.
mhm.
When it, insofar as what it means for human beings to be able to live into the fullness of our human, social, political, governmental, chronological, divine destiny, that's the moment that I would hope we would focus in on, and then take cues from what has happened throughout human history, not just American history. When you say
Mm.
be on the right side of it, that means we have the capacity to act in ways that support the progress of the human species. And then we
Come
have
on.
the capacity to operate in ways that hinder or compromise or diminish human the human condition overall.
Right.
So what have we done? What can we do? You talk about being on the right side of history. Malcolm said, "I'm for justice no matter who's for or against it, and I'm for truth no matter who's speaking it." And
Woo.
so to be on the right side of history means to know enough about what is true and to know
Uh-huh.
enough about what is just to not only support it when somebody else does it, but to engage in that behavior yourself.
Come on
And now
now.
we have an opportunity to do that. And I believe the opportunity is before us insofar as, first and foremost, defeating the person who we know undoubtedly. If you love Black folk, if you love Black life, if you love the human species, and you are limited to these two choices, the 45th president
Mm-hmm.
and the current vice president,
Mm-hmm.
one of these is clearly anti-Black, anti-woman, anti-truth, anti-justice, anti-equity, and all of the other embodiments of evil and injustice that we could think of. That's what the former president actually is and represents. And so anything that we do that does not stop him from returning to what we would call the highest office in the land would put us on the wrong side of history. Because
Come
no
on.
matter what happens in November, ultimately, God's will for humanity will be acted out. It's just a matter of when.
Right.
I
Right.
want it to be done sooner rather than later, or at least I want to contribute to it happening sooner rather than later. And I don't want to engage in actions and behaviors that make God and God's people have to work overtime.
That's
You
all
know
I'm
what I'm
saying.
saying?
That's all I'm
So,
saying.
so,
Go ahead,
so,
Bishop.
so
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I mean, in a nutshell, that's what I see happening in this particular moment. And so, first and foremost, we got to stop them, and them being all of those who do not have humanity's best interest at heart, from constantly assuming and sustaining positions of power that allow them to engage in practices and politics and endorse policies that make it harder on the human beings. And I'm talking about Black ones in this country, especially.
Especially, but I do, and I can appreciate the fact that you said humanity, because what a lot of people are not understanding is that it's going to start with us, right? But it's not going to end with us. His rage and disdain for humanity is something that needs to be highlighted, that it's going to start with African American community, but it's going to trickle down to everybody, even those who are poor whites, right? They're going to also be a part of whatever it is that he's trying to perpetrate upon humanity. And so in light of what you said about, of course, we're talking about.
Let me interject something, Bishop.
Go
Let
ahead.
me interject something for just a second. I don't mean to be rude, but I do
No,
mean
no, go
to
ahead.
interrupt.
I want you to
Now,
talk.
I want to plant a flag right here and say all of that is true. And I want to be clear, I'm talking about humanity overall. But for us, it is time for us to center Black folks. So
Make
henceforth,
black
all
folks priority is what you're saying.
yeah, yes, absolutely. Like it is,
Okay.
and to that point, here's where I think we need to collectively and comprehensively learn to manage this particular moment. There are certain things we need to discuss at the kitchen table,
Come on.
and then certain things that we can discuss on camera. So there's certain things you and I will even get into right now because this is an interview and we need to reach as many Black folks as possible. And then there's certain governance issues, what
Sure.
Black folks mean to each other that we need to have a conversation about. We might not even be able to have that as thoroughly and as tactically as we need to have it until after we accomplish what I was just saying. Stop Trump from getting
Let's
back at
stop him. Let's make that priority
Stop
collectively.
the bleeding, okay? Stop the bleeding first. We are going. We will have every opportunity to address it. Now we've had opportunities in the past that we squandered. When Obama was in office, we had opportunities to address some of the stuff, and we just didn't do it. Maybe we weren't equipped. Maybe we didn't have the appetite. Maybe we didn't have the courage. I'm sure there's a million things. But where we
Sure.
are right now, we cannot lose focus. We cannot lose focus of what the main thing is, which is stopping the bleeding. And so I would want to make sure that we center Black folks in this conversation, but also be very mindful of the fact that there are certain things we can't discuss on camera. We got to have a family conversation. And too many of us end up having family conversations in public. And I'm scared that we're doing it because we are more concerned individually with our egos and our platforms.
So,
And we've
Dr. Fisher.
developed this appetite and this unction based upon the matrix of social media, such that we'll say stuff even if we don't believe it because we think it's controversial, we think it's antagonistic. And that's the thing that the social media algorithms have caused to erupt and go viral. We need to be much more disciplined. We need to be much more delicate. We need to be much more sophisticated and nuanced and politically pragmatic in this moment. And I'm talking to Black folks right now.
Wow. Wow. Well, listen, I got a couple of more questions. That's very powerful. I don't know if this is a conversation that should be at the kitchen table or public, but I'm gonna throw it out there and you'll let me know.
Yeah,
Right. What would you say to voters who would say that they are not voting for Vice President Harris simply because she's Black? What would you say to them?
That's a great question. I think it is a question worth us discussing publicly.
Okay.
What I believe is my most honest answer is grounded in a few things that I understand through my relationship with God and ministry and my relationship with the academic discipline of rhetoric and communication that I've been trained in. So theologically, we would say those people have a reprobate mind. If you are saying that you're not going to vote for this woman who is one of, if not the, who is clearly one of the most qualified candidates on
That's
paper.
clear. That's
Right,
very clear.
point blank, period. I know folks on the right are talking this ridiculous language of DEI hires. That's because they just are so blinded by their own white nationalist and white supremacist ideologies and sensibilities.
Yes.
They can't even understand that when people hire people to meet diversity quotas, they don't just pull from the bottom of the barrel. You still got to be qualified, okay?
You still got to be qualified, sir.
So Ketanji Brown Jackson was not thrust into the Supreme Court and never been to law school. Okay, she got all of the credentials in the world, and what they are responding to is the reality that credentials and skill set and gift and capacity don't matter to them when you Black. Only thing that matters is that you Black. That's why their mind is reprobate. So, and it's too many Black folks who take their cues from white folks who think and act this way. I
Sir.
don't know if they can be redeemed, and I'm not going to waste my limited capacity, my intellectual, my ministerial, my political intelligence, insight, and energy in this short window of time. I know we'll discuss the short window of time, but it's only a
Sure.
short window of time. They have reprobate mind if that's how they think. I can't convince them. I can't. And then in rhetoric, it's what they would call the unpersuadable audience. So what I would
Mm.
rather do is try to find those who can be adequately engaged, educated, informed, and empowered to vote properly. So I would rather
Right.
spend my energy on that. And I believe in this moment, and I think over the last few days, we've seen a resurgence in possibility insofar as getting people who haven't been interested in politics to be more interested now, to get
Right.
younger people who have been discouraged and frustrated by the political landscape.
Mhm.
Now they sense like, well, maybe it is an opportunity to do something and be something and
Right.
break through
Right.
the glass ceiling. I would rather, Bishop, I'd rather try to focus on them. Those
Wow.
who just were undecided, but not saying
Hmm.
I'm not going to vote. Because if you are saying, look, if you are saying that your quote unquote logic, which is very illogical, for not voting for Kamala Harris is that she's black, you're a damn fool and ain't nothing I can do to change that. God can
Now,
do something, I'll leave that in God's hands, but I'm not
right.
about to try to convince and persuade you because the amount of time it would take for those of us who don't already have deep, loving, and nurturing relationships with people who think that way is just going to be too short of a window.
Okay. So let me ask this. That addresses the white landscape, but then there are black people who are
Yeah,
simply saying, "Hey, I know that she's black, but that's not enough
sure.
for me
Yeah.
to give her my vote." What would you say to our people that would think that way?
Well, first, I respect that. I don't think black folks have had the luxury of being solely people who engage in identity politics, as they would call it, right?
Okay,
So, uh, uh, Ben Carson is black. I'm not voting for him.
I got
Um,
you. Right.
Tim Scott is black. I'm not voting for him, right?
Yeah.
So I don't expect anybody to vote for someone simply because they're black. Now, here's what I would
Okay.
say. If you end up in a situation where two people are neck and neck, right? All of the credentials, all the qualifications, all that, blah, 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 and one is black and one is white, I would hope you would vote for the one that you most closely identify with. And if you got any speck of black consciousness, that would mean vote for the black person, right?
Right.
But I respect those who say I ain't voting for them just because she's black. So then I would ask, okay, so what are the issues that are most important to you? And what
Okay.
is it that you would need from a candidate? And I ask every black person, do this with the current main candidates. The only two candidates that have a chance to win right now are
Right.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So you take these two candidates, you take whatever your issues are and what you want to happen politically and legislatively, and from a policy standpoint, from these two perspectives, and who is most closely aligned. Here's where the sophistication comes in. Here's where the nuance comes in. Here's where the political pragmatism comes in. Pragmatism means trying to weigh the options and see what could actually be done. It's different than
Hmm.
optimism. Optimism is what you hope would happen. Realism
Right.
is whatever does happen. And skepticism is thinking no matter what, the worst is going to happen. Okay. I'm saying pragmatism, be politically pragmatic. Let's look at what is possible and try to figure out what is the best case scenario considering the cards that are on the table. And so if you do that from a political pragmatism standpoint, you have to admit nobody is going to get all of what they want.
Come on, that's a fact.
We got some folk who are politically immature, bratish, and spoiled, and will surrender 80% of what they want because of the 20% that they don't get.
Don't make sense.
Neither Kamala nor Donald Trump are going to be aligned with black folks on every issue.
It's not going to happen.
In fact, if we ever get that governance conversation at the kitchen table, what we'll discover is we got to learn to make room for black folks who don't align with us, other black folks, on everything,
Yeah.
because there's a
Yes.
diverse range of experiences and perspectives even within the black community itself. And so sometimes when we just say the black community, we act like everybody believes and thinks the same way and the same thing, and that's
Right.
not the case.
We're not a monolithic people.
Right. So you got to weigh the options, look at the issues. And I'm telling you, on issues that really matter to black folks, on economic issues, unless you are the 1% and rich, and most niggas ain't, stop
That's
acting like it.
that,
Okay.
that's fact.
You're not. You got to deal with what economic policies have substantially impacted the black classes, the middle class, the lower economic classes, the masses. So who's better for poor folks? Who's better for black folks? I'm telling you
Exactly.
now, it's clear. Deal with issues of healthcare. Who is on the right side of healthcare issues? Who is on the right side of educational issues? Who is on the right side of criminal justice reform issues? And I mean, when you start weighing those things, I don't think anybody is saying vote for her just because she's black.
Right.
Here's what I say. I know that the going term and phraseology right now is I'm with her. I get
Right.
it. I am not with her per se. I'm
Yeah.
with us. I'm with black folk. And she just so happens to be in the best position to help us right
I
now.
love it. I love it.
Was not in that position 3 days ago. She is right now. And I'm willing to allow anybody who think they can to lay out the case for me of whoever else is better, in a better position. You won't find me. So
You're
I
not
say we're voting for her not simply because she's black is a bonus.
it's a
It's a
bonus.
beautiful thing. I'm
It's
saying
icing
because
on
of
the
the
cake.
choices that we have, she is the best option for black folks across the spectrum. The only ones I would say can say she might not be the best for them are black folks in the 1%, like Jay-Z, Oprah, Dave Chappelle, Robert Johnson, black
Yeah.
billionaires. They might be able to say, nah, she ain't the best for us.
Exactly.
But if you ain't in that 1% tax bracket, I bet you your bottom dollar, if you do enough research and are honest in your findings, you will have to admit she is not perfect. None of them are. None of us are going to get 100% of what we want, but she is going to check off way more boxes
Okay.
than her opponent.
And so I think I do want to bring this up because of course we know that she has a history there in the west in on the west coast as it
Yes,
relates to prosecuting African Americans. And
yes,
so a lot of people are still bitter
yeah,
because of some of her judgments that she passed in the past, and they said that she had, and I don't know how true it is, how bad it was, because I'm not from the West Coast, but a lot of
right,
people said that it was pretty tough and she was pretty hard as a DA on African American men. And
yeah.
so, what would you say to them in light of, or is the record that they are projecting, is it really true that she
Yeah.
was that bad? Like, what would you say to them who are looking at her past record as a prosecutor and saying she's been too hard on us?
So I am reasonably aware of these issues and the claims that are made regarding her record as district attorney. And I will say, I know a lot of people in California who can speak to this much more thoroughly than I can. And I would say people like uh, Pastor Mike McBride, for those who know Mike McBride, take your
Yeah,
cues from him, right? And
he
other
was on the
people.
call. He was on the call the other night.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Okay,
organized the Black Church Pack, among other things. So
okay,
so look, you can Google Pastor Mike McBride, and Google will be your friend in that regard. And he's somebody who I would yield the floor to fully about this issue. But here's what I could say from the vantage point of what I know to be true. And I'm circling back to this need for us to be politically pragmatic and sophisticated and nuanced in this moment. So
mhm,
check all of the facts. And also, when you start talking about people in the criminal justice system,
Mm-hmm.
official, elected officials in these
Mm-hmm.
systems. We have to temper expectations insofar as what can and cannot be done. You won't be in that position. You cannot be a district attorney and not like nobody else.
It's just not. It's sir. It's not
It's,
realistic.
it's not
It's
possible. It's not possible, right? So then the question would be, what is her concrete record on things that we would assign or ascribe to criminal justice reform stuff? What did she do with death penalty cases?
okay.
What did she do with non-violent offense cases?
Okay.
In the instances where things were left to her discretion, she started stuff in California that other quote unquote progressive prosecutors implemented across the country.
Wow.
So this does not mean that her track record is spotless, because nobody who is a prosecutor can have a spotless track record and still
Nobody, sir.
ascend up the corporate and political ladder in that
If
regard.
if
Now,
they are ambitious, they're going to have to do. They got to play the game, so to speak, right? If
yeah,
they are ambitious.
yes, and I don't even know if that's the best phraseology, play the game, but they have to support the system at some level,
Okay.
right? And so I think, again, we can be honest about the several different things that are true at the same time, and
Okay.
then conclude that the best path forward is going to be the pragmatic path, not the path of the skeptic and not the path of the optimist.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I say that to say, I'm not rebuking, I'm not demonizing. I would ask some people, so why would we just focus on that negative stuff?
Why would we? Exactly.
Why would
Exactly.
we not try to look at the fullest possible picture of what it is she has done, what it is she is doing? And here's the question: do we think her opponent has a better record of criminal justice reform than she does?
Absolutely.
Do,
Listen.
do we think do we think if Trump was a district attorney,
Oh
he
my.
would have operated the same as her? Do we think he would have operated better than her as it relates to locking black folks up? Do we think he would operate worse than her?
Wow.
Because these are the choices that we have to make based upon the cards that are on the table right now. Look, if you playing spades, black folk, and you start out and you look at your hand and you realize all you have in your hand is a 10 of spades and a 7 of spades and a 3 of spades. But then at some point you look up again, and through
Uh-huh.
some miraculous shift, you end up with a queen of spades. Don't you play your hand differently?
Mm,
You got to play it different. So
you
you
got
are
to play this.
always playing the hand that has been dealt. But here we are acting like we had a joker all along.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Listen, family, I know that you are enjoying this conversation with Dr. Fisher. I'm sure that you are being enlightened right now. I want you to take some time, pause, and share this video. Share it with your friends, your family. And I think this conversation is worth you gathering your family around to sit down and watch it. Cast it on your TV, so that you all can sit down and watch and listen to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Right. This is what I would think would be a great conversation that we're having that would really push us in the right direction, cause us to think more clearer as it relates to what it is that we need to do to move us forward. So share the video, share it with your friends, your family, share this video with your coworkers, so that we can all be enlightened as we endeavor to do what needs to be done this November. Dr. Fisher, having said that, my next question would be, do you realistically, I know you said, you talked about being pragmatic, you talked about optimistic,
Yeah.
think that this late in the game, introducing a new candidate, do we realistically have an opportunity to beat Donald Trump in November?
Absolutely. The numbers are there. I mean, I'm not conjuring up some this is not faith being the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen necessarily, right? Like there's some concrete database factual stuff, and political commentators across the landscape are talking about how viable
Mm.
and
How much did she raise in 24 hours?
she set a record. I know
Dang.
that. So I don't want to misquote. I think one number that's coming to mind is like $81 million and something
It
like
was something like 80 something $1 million.
but there's a white political commentator that has accurately predicted the result of every election and the winner of every election since
Okay.
2000. Now they contest the 2000 thing because he basically said Gore would win, and technically Gore won.
I was going to say technically he did.
But even if you leave Gore off, you would say every election since 2004 he's predicted correctly, and he has a series of these indicators. And even before President Biden has gracefully bowed out, he was saying the thing that checks the most boxes for incumbents, and would make it most likely for that person to win, could be reasonably shifted to Vice President Harris. And so that's one indicator. The polls talking about, who might win and who's within the margin of error, that indicates very much so she can win. Folks who followed closely in 2008, don't forget, we were saying we didn't think Barack Obama could win and it had to be Hillary as the choice. And it wasn't until after Obama won the Iowa primary and black folks started saying, oh, well, he could actually get the white vote, right? And don't forget, in 2020, Biden was on the ropes until the South Carolina primary, and people like Jim Clyburn came and said, take your cues from the black folks in South Carolina. So I would say this: if you want to know if they can win, talk to your grandmama and ask your grandmama if she could vote between Trump and Kamala Harris, who she would pick. And that will answer your question of who can win. I bet you the overwhelming majority of black grandmamas is going to say Kamala is who they're going to vote for. So the question for us is, how do you get them to the poll?
Wow. How do you get them to the poll? How do you? So I want you, if you can, just briefly talk about how important it is, or how do we mobilize our voters, particularly our young voters. Like I have a daughter who's going to be voting for the first time, right?
Yes.
And of course she was not excited at all, right? Initially, and we do talk politics, and we watch debates, we watch CNN, we watch all of these things, just so they can understand that, what's going on in the world. And but now she is excited, right, to vote, right, for Kamala. And so, but there are a lot of people in her age bracket that are just simply they are blah, they're not excited. So how do we mobilize? What would we say to them to get them to understand how this will affect everything going forward, right?
Yeah. So, I know that this is the interview of me, but you know how we do. This is going to be a dialogue of sorts, because I think you are tapping into something very rich and hopeful and promising and instructive when you describe what has happened with your own daughter.
Right.
So at one point, she's apathetic, right? Disengaged, not really interested. But then something happens, and now she's engaged, she's motivated, she's empowered, or at least she feels empowered. And I say, you have to excavate that. You have to mine that. You have to dig into what has happened with her. And you have to be able to create a scenario and a circumstance where that happens for more people. She is on to something, right? And you have direct proximity and access to that. Now, I want to put that in one box and category because that's the essence of what needs to happen. Something else that we have to understand is, as much as we might want to create individually these mass movements and opportunities, really where the rubber meets the road is in the simple, mundane, small, one-on-one conversation and direct empowerment strategies. So for Up the Vote 901, one of the things that we had begun to incorporate here in Memphis that helped us build some momentum and increase some turnout and get more people engaged and involved is what we would call canvassing your network. General canvassing strategies by people who have a whole lot of money and ground games and these political campaigns that get people to go door to door and knock on people's door, right? Like there's some value in that on a large scale. But where you really get transformation is when you look at people that you have direct relationship with and start with those conversations. It could be 3 people, 5 people, right? We like, don't worry about canvassing the whole community. Canvass your network, people in your church, people in your community center, people in your family. I cannot tell you the number of political conversations I've had with my mother, with my sister, with my cousins, with my church members over the last few years, whereby now they are reaching out to me. Hey, Doc, what you think? Hey, Rev. Hey, bro. Hey, son, what do you think? Hey, cuz, what do you think about these things? Kind of like taking cues, even when they are discouraged. And the other thing you do, if you're going to mobilize somebody, don't demonize them.
Okay.
I wrote an article several years ago, and I'll share the link in the chat. And it is about how it's called For Gen Xers and Millennials Who Considered Voting When Fatalism Wasn't Enough. Fatalism is this term saying it don't matter what we do, we're going to hell in a handbasket, right? Like, so what if you're considering voting, right? And it is my reflection on these experiences with people, everyday people in the community, many of whom start off the conversation of political engagement with my vote don't matter, they're gonna pull they want it. And I say there are 3 primary strategies that you should engage in. Number 1, hear them out. Humanize them. Don't demonize them. You know, they are expressing to you in sincerity and in a lot of instances in confidence how they feel, and you can ask them why they feel that way and honor that. You can't simply say, man, you crazy, I don't know what's wrong with you, you know, you're blah blah blah, right?
Like you have to respect their opinions and what you're saying, basically.
You have to value their humanity is what I'm saying. They are human beings made in the image of God who have experiences and convictions and fears and anxieties and joys and strengths and all of this other stuff that make up the matrix of who we are in this moment. Listen to them. Hear them out. Don't automatically jump back with, but your ancestors died for this. Yes, that's true, but that's not persuadable to them.
Wow.
So start by hearing them out. Number 2, explain something in terms of history and the political landscape. I call it the jelly bean rule. Explain to them how in times past, our elders and ancestors were required to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap and the number of jelly beans in a jar in order to be able to cast their ballot. Wow. And ask them, why do they think that is? Like the same person who said is my vote don't matter. So I hear you. You say your vote don't matter. Here's what we know. It's documented as factual history. It's truth. Here's what our ancestors had to do. Why did they have to do that? If the vote does not matter, why did they make our ancestors do that? Ask them for the explanation. Have a conversation with them about that. Now, this does mean you need to know a little bit about history and the history of the political process in the country and inclusion and amendments and all of this other stuff and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, all of that stuff, right? You ain't got to be an expert in it. You ain't got to be a political scientist, but know something about it and have that honest conversation. Now, this is part of the transformation process. Notice it's steps in this.
Okay.
The third thing that you have to explain to them is what I call the 25% rule. Okay. Ask them if they pay taxes. Some of them will knee jerk and say no, but they're lying. Because ask them who bought their clothes, ask them if they have a car and buy
Uh-huh.
gas, ask them if they've ever been to a grocery store and bought groceries. You don't have to have real estate in order to pay taxes because gas is taxed, clothes are taxed,
Amen.
groceries are taxed, which means you contribute financially to a governmental system. And somebody who was elected to office, somebody who was appointed by somebody who was elected, and somebody who is employed by somebody who is either elected or appointed is going to decide where your money goes. In local elections, you are looking at, on average, about 25% turnout.
Wow.
So 25% of the people are deciding what's happening with what 100% of your money. How do you feel about that?
Wow.
And by the
Wow.
time you get to that economic stuff, now notice I didn't start with money.
Sure. Sure.
I started with humanity. You move from humanity to history. And then from history, you move to practicality. And what's the most practical thing people want to talk about? Money,
Money.
the economy. And so by the time you do
Absolutely.
that, you've created a very healthy dynamic between you and that person to talk about more issues and to talk about more of the opportunity of the political engagement strategy. And let's be honest, y'all, voting is not the ceiling of political engagement. It's actually the baseline and the floor. It's the least you could do is go to, look, even if you ain't never gonna go to a city council meeting or a county commission meeting, even if you ain't never
Mhm.
gonna visit Congress and right, never that, if you ain't never gonna protest nothing, the least you could do is get you some information, look at issues that are important to you, look at where candidates stand on those issues, and go to the ballot box and cast your vote. So those are strategies that can help us mobilize more people.
Wow. Wow. Listen, family, I know you're enjoying this. We thank Dr. Fisher for all of the information that he's sharing. We just got a few more moments. We're going to get you to share this video. I would even suggest that you would tag someone in light of some of the things that he was saying about how we can engage, basically talking about dealing with people that you have direct connection with, those who are in close proximity, those who are in your home, those who you have a relationship with, those that that you can, they're just a phone call away. Tag some of them, right, and just allow them to hear the conversation, and allow them to even engage there in the comments if they would. But share the video, and let's get this kind of information uh, in front of as many people as we possibly can. In front of many people as we possibly can. Also, I want to pause before we move on to our next couple of questions. Dr. Fisher, can you just talk about your book right quick? Just share them the information and how they can get it, where they can get it from, and all of that.
Yeah, you can look up my book, Reverend Albert Clegg Jr. and the Black Prophetic Tradition, a reintroduction to the Black Messiah, on Amazon and all those other places. I'll put a link where you can buy it directly from me, and I'll get you all a discount. I'm not trying to be a New York Times bestseller. The book is especially for people who are interested in the intersection of like religion and Black preaching and politics and radical Black politics, especially pastors, preachers, but also everyday people who just want to know a little bit more about history and the ways in which history has taught us how to honor Black religion and Black life. It is actually my dissertation reworked in a couple of ways. And for those who
Sure.
don't know, Albert Clegg Jr. is a longstanding pastor in Detroit, Michigan, at the height of the civil rights and Black Power movement. And so he's definitely a figure that has been understudied. And so I felt compelled to kind of like amplify his voice. I relate to him in a lot of ways with what I found myself involved in and engaged in here in Memphis and Shelby County. And then I'm a native Michigander. Benton Harbor, Michigan is representing in here. And so, yeah, you can definitely check that out. We'll put the links in there. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug that book. But I definitely want to shift back to this more pertinent conversation right now about the political landscape.
Sure. So I would ask, I I don't know if we covered this. We've discussed so much, but do you think that is important, or how important, should I say, is it for the black man
Mm-hmm.
to support
Yeah.
what's taking place with our sister, Vice President Kamala Harris? Is it important, or
Yeah.
how important is to hear the black man's voice and to see the black man moving in the
Yeah.
right direction?
Yeah, man, that's a beautiful question for us. I'm glad you brought it up, because earlier when we were talking, I was thinking about something, and now I get a chance to kind of discuss it. I think we have fallen victim to a myth that the majority of black men somehow wouldn't or won't support black women. So if you go back to 2020,
Okay.
92% of black women voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. I was actually down from 2016, if I'm not mistaken, because I think it was 96% of black women in 2016.
Okay.
In 2020, 88% of black men voted for the Biden-Harris ticket.
All
Yes, I
right.
said 88%. Now, that was down from 2016, when I think it was 92% of black men that voted for the Democratic ticket then. So in the large percentage of it, what the numbers show is black men, I'm talking to my black sisters now, okay? Because we've been beating the hell out of black men. And I'm
Come
not
on.
saying no black men need to have their ass beat. I'm saying we've been whipping black men as a whole and disregarding the reality of the numbers. And you cannot undervalue how many black men would have also voted for Biden Harris in 2020, or Hillary, I think it was Tim Kaine in 2016, but for felony disenfranchisement, and they can't vote. So I don't want to buy into the lie that black men in droves are somehow unwilling to support black women. I will say there have been too many black men that have done it, and we need to address that. So we know you cannot win these elections without securing the black vote. And the black vote is black men and black women, and black trans folk, and black queer folk, and black folk across the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about black men now. Y'all hear me,
Sure.
sisters? I'm not dismissing, we're not diminishing none of that. For this segment, for these few moments, we're talking about black men. And it is important, and it is vital, and it is valuable for black men to be included in this. In times past, some of the main issues that made it to the mainstream in association with the Democratic Party in general did not seem to be fully inclusive of black men. Some might say when you deal with issues of criminal justice reform, it impacts black men kind of like by default or by proxy, and that's true to a large extent. But there were a lot of criticisms and condemnations, even of Barack Obama, where people would say he didn't, center black women. And then if you ask them what the Lilly Ledbetter Act is, they don't know what it is. But the Lilly Ledbetter Act was actually Barack Obama's first law he signed into action as president. And it was about equal pay for black women.
Wow.
So what we haven't seen that I'm aware of, it might be out there. So please, brothers, sisters, friends, kin, educate us on this. But I'm not familiar with, these explicit, am I my brother's keeper? is something that Obama had for black men. And I think in a lot of ways that stirred up, there's been this gender war that I think the black community has borrowed from the white supremacist and white nationalist world order and just amplified it and begun to do some of the work of our enemies for us, right? So I'm saying you can't win without black men. And I believe when black men feel fully engaged and fully embraced and fully affirmed and fully included in the political agenda, just like every other group that we can identify with these types of criteria, then you find black men. And I'm saying even without that, we didn't have that and still voted 88%. The struggle for us is this. It's twofold, Bishop. The struggle for us is in our current political landscape. Nobody in the Republican Party since Ronald Reagan has won the popular vote.
Which is can you repeat that?
Nobody since Ronald Reagan in 1980, okay, has won the popular vote. So if you calculate everybody who has voted every year since 1980, the majority of people vote against the Republican Party. The reasons why Ronald Reagan won 2 terms, the reason Reagan won his second term, the reason Bush won his term, and the reason Bush 2 won both terms, the reason Trump won is because they end up winning the calculation, or what I would argue the miscalculation of the Electoral College.
Okay.
So you end up with that's why they call these certain states battleground states, right? Because since the Civil War, the South has been in lockstep with white nationalists, whether it was the Democratic Party prior to the 1960s, or whether it's been since the 1960s with the Republican Party. You almost automatically factor in Virginia. You almost automatically factor in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, right? Because the South, and if you do the history, y'all, it's connected to the Civil War, it's connected to the issue of enslavement, so is the Electoral College, right? You always are up against this numerical reality. And so it don't matter how many black folk in Memphis, black men in Memphis vote for the Democratic Party or vote for the progressive nominees, because Tennessee, at least over the last several years, is in lockstep with the white nationalist, white supremacist political landscape. You're getting all of the South, so you end up with states that might go either way. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And so, and Georgia was in play in 2020. I think North Carolina was in play in 2020. And so now you're dealing with these real short margins. That's why, even though you say 88% of black men, the difference between a win and a loss might be that 2%. You might need 90% of black men. You might need 92% of black men to win, right? And so then you got to figure out, where can you get these small margins in the most critical and crucial places? And it might be just your one phone conversation with your black uncle or your black brother, or your black nephew, or your black cousin, or your black granddaddy, right? In places like Michigan, in places like Pennsylvania, in places like Wisconsin, in Minnesota, in now maybe Oklahoma, Arizona, in Texas, in Florida. So you got that factor, right? So that's why I get the argument, y'all. It's a legitimate argument when you start talking about these small percentages, but I just won't buy into the lie that black men in vast majority are voting against our best interests. I'm saying those 12% of black men in 2020 voted against the interest of the majority of black men. I'm saying those 8% of black men in 2016, and it mattered in those real detailed kind of ways, but these wholesale condemnations and demonizations of black men just aren't helping us. So I hope that's a thorough response to how important it is to get black men on board, and maybe some of the ways to think about which black men to target.
Absolutely. It definitely sheds some light on where black men have been trending
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
last several elections, and so that gives us hope to know that the black man is standing firm. And one of the things that you said, it could be just a simple phone call to a few men that you have connection with, just to shed some light with them, in order to get them to vote and make sure that they can get there. That's another thing. It's you know a lot of people don't have a way to get to vote,
Yeah.
and so we
And
have to
Bishop, let me say again, let me interject one more time and just salute those who have organized efforts centering black men in support of Vice President Harris in the
okay.
last few days. You know,
Yes.
you heard about the phone call, I'm sure, with like 50,000 black men or 60,000 black men.
Yes.
You were on the
Yes.
phone call with black faith leaders the other day, right? With
Yes.
thousands, up on thousands of already. And black men, listen, I'm saying black men are out
Hmm.
here.
That was led by black men. It certainly was.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was impressive. It was very impressive, man, and heartfelt as well, because it just shows that we understand, that we really understand, and that we want to make sure that we win. In our last few moments, Dr. Fisher, if you can, because there are a lot of people who simply don't understand whether they I tell people all the time, there's a difference in being blind and in closing your eyes, right?
mhm,
And so there are a lot of people who choose to just not see uh 45 for who he is, right? No matter how blatant he is in his approach, no matter how bold he is. I mean, all you got to do is listen. He's telling you exactly who he is and what his plans are. And
yeah.
so that leads me to Project 2025,
Mhm.
right? If you can, in our last few moments, shed some light to our audience, um, on what Project 2025 means in a nutshell.
Sure. Let me walk into that this way, Bishop, because
Hmm.
Project 2025, which Donald Trump tried to lie and say he knew nothing about, even though several people who were in his administration have
Oh,
been the
yes.
architects of this. Um, and even his version of it, which I think they're calling the Agenda 47. But Project 2025 in particular is over 900 pages long, right? And so we know most people, I'm a scholar. Yeah, I'll sift through it, right? I'll dig into it.
Sure.
But most of us aren't. And it's not possible to talk about it probably as thoroughly as we should in the amount
Sure.
of time we have left. But there are several things that are happening over the next few days with faith leaders, with community leaders, with political leaders who are shedding more and more light on this. And um, I've been inspired and encouraged to see Vice President Harris hammer that point home because it is crucial. But what I want to say about the sentiment of Project 2025 in relationship to President Trump is this: the Republican Party, the white nationalists, the white supremacists, um, tend to view politics and political figures as tools to get access to power.
Okay.
So they didn't care if it was Donald Trump or somebody else, if it was going to give them access to that power. And what you see in Project 2025 are the methods and the tactics they tend to employ or they desire to employ to get access to and to sustain as much power as they can for as long as they can. The counterparts to white nationalists and white supremacists and Republicans far too often don't view politics or political personalities as tools to get access to power. They view them as family members, and they view it as a house that's supposed to get them access to love and happiness and joy and inclusivity and all of that. And
Mhm.
so we end up miscalculating and mismanaging what the whole political apparatus is supposed to be. It is about power. Project 2025 is about white nationalists and white supremacists, social, political, religious, economic, cultural power.
Power.
And this is how they intend to get it. This is how they intend to keep it. So much so that January 6th was really just a walk in the park. So there are a few things that I can touch on real quick
Sure.
about the content of Project 2025.
Okay.
It is intended to make voting rights more difficult to obtain and maintain for Black folks. It is intended to privatize public education, which we know, if you go back to Brown versus the board, or go back
Mhm.
as far as you can in this country to anything connected to public education, HBCUs and all of this, it will make it much more difficult for Black folks to get access to any type of valuable and robust education on a mass scale.
Mhm.
And if you think about the legal system, if you think about political appointees, especially judges, and I think hundreds of them are coming up in the next election cycle, it is
Mhm.
intended to make sure that those political appointees are those who are aligned with this philosophy, ideology, and agenda, not people who are going to be disciplined and objective and responsible regardless of who is in office.
Mm.
That is
Wow.
Project 2025 in a nutshell. So
In a
some of
nutshell.
these political positions from judgeships and other staff positions where people are supposed to serve, like things like the Department of Justice, things, look, they want to eradicate a whole lot of political departments that are, the Department of Education, as I stated earlier, they want to basically get rid of that. Environmental Protection Agency,
Wow.
uh, uh, I think the Department of Transportation, right? All of these things where people, regardless of their political affiliation, see their primary responsibility of serving as responsibly as possible in that position and make sure government is functioning as effectively and as efficiently as it possibly can. They saying the hell with all of that. Put somebody in that position that
Mm.
will ultimately pledge allegiance to the political party and the political personality. It is a playbook for dictatorship and
Dictatorship. Right.
authoritarianism and an oligarchy. If you don't know what those words are, please just look them up, right? But it's no
Right.
longer about democracy. It's no longer about equality. It is no longer about freedom and justice for all. It is not about that. And that is, look, they not hiding it, Bishop.
That's what I've been trying to get people to understand is that they are not hiding this. They're putting this out there that this is what we want to happen. And
Yes.
given the opportunity, this is what we're going to make happen. And
Yes.
it's going to affect everything in this country going forward.
Yes.
And so the fact that they are bold enough to say it, it's just important for us to just not close our eyes. And that's what I was saying. Some people are blinded. They just don't get it. They don't understand. They don't comprehend. I get that. But there are those who just refuse to even pay attention to anything that's going on. They refuse to see how important it is to be informed, if you will. And that's the whole purpose of this conversation with you, sir. I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you as this thing moves forward. You have blessed us all. You have enlightened us. Again, audience, I want you to share this video with your friends, your family, your coworkers. Share it with some people who may not believe the same thing that you believe. Share it with some people who may not see it the way that you see it. And perhaps through this conversation, they may hear something that's worthwhile and something that would prick their hearts and cause them to see things from a different vantage point, right? And so we want you to share this. Dr. Fisher, I want you to let people know where they can keep up with you on social media, give out your social media pages so people can kind of keep up with you and tap into what it is that you have to offer.
Sure. And let me thank you again for this opportunity, man. It's so good to chop it up with you, brother. Thank you for
Likewise.
thinking of me in this regard. People don't have to think of you, and they sure don't have to think of you in a nice way. And again, salute to Dr. Jacqueline King. If you want to catch up with me, Earle J. Fisher on Facebook, Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church on Facebook, at Pastor underscore Earle on Instagram and Twitter, at ABC Ministries, the number one on Instagram, and on YouTube, Abyssinian Baptist Church, Memphis. Tupac said, although I'm worldwide, baby, I ain't hard to find.
Listen, family, that's it. We thank God for all of you tuning in. We thank God for Dr. Fisher. Again, we shout out our founder and our CEO. We're going to have all of his information on the screen so that you'll be able to check it out. You'll be able to click the link down in the comments. We'll have it pinned so that you can order his book. I promise you it will be a worthwhile read for you. And until next time, we just want to thank you for tuning in to BWEBME. I'm your host, Bishop Kevin Whitaker. We can't wait until you get with us again. All right? Grace and peace. We out.